Hello, Sturgis Missionary Church. Thank you for joining with us today. Thank you for those who took part in our Zoom fellowship meeting. It was great to see your face. It was great to hear what life has been like for you the last few days. It was great to share laughter with you. Thank you for those who have been encouraging the ministry coordinators and myself as we navigate these new times. Your words of comfort and encouragement mean a lot to us. And thank you for everybody that's been tuning in to our messages. I miss you guys greatly, and I understand that I am more introverted, so my heart hurts and aches for those of you that are extroverts. It has to be extremely difficult during this time of being separated. So stay strong. Stay encouraged. It looks like we're getting to the point where we're going to be slowly getting back to being able to see one another again, see our friends and our family. So stay strong. Don't lose hope yet. Don't give up. That new times are coming, it looks like, on the horizon. So we can rejoice and be excited with that. Some things to be looking at for Sturgis Missionary Church. We've changed up our Wednesday times in two different ways. First off, we used to just do it on Facebook, and realizing that not everybody has a Facebook, and maybe you want to tune in to the activities that we're doing or be a part of the devotionals. So we are now uploading those on our YouTube page as well, so Sturgis Missionary Church's YouTube page. So those will premiere live at 7:30 in the evening on Wednesdays, both on Facebook, on our Sturgis Missionary Church Facebook page, and our YouTube page for Sturgis Missionary Church. Now, just because they premiere at those times live doesn't mean that you can only view them then. You can view them at any point after they have went live to be able to tune in to see what we're doing. So again, we have an activity that we're doing with those and a devotional that we do at the end. Something else that we've added to our Wednesday evenings is we're giving away freebies. Not because we're trying to get people to tune into these messages, but just to try to have a little bit of fun during this time of separation. And try to build a little bit of a community. And so because we have a lot of attenders of Sturgis Missionary Church, and we want to make it encouraging and exciting for those who are viewing the videos, we are going to ask that you either leave a comment to the video, or you send us through a contact form that's on our webpage and just let us know that you're watching those videos, and then that'll enter you into the drawing, just to make it a little bit more appeasing to those that are actually engaging in there, that they have a bigger chance of winning the prizes that we're going to hand out. So again, you don't have to ask necessarily to be a part of that. Just let us know that you're watching, and you don't have to do this every single week. Just do it one time, and that'll enter you into the drawing. So this is both for the kids of Sturgis Missionary Church and adults and youth like that. So our activities is a competition that my family does, and we represent one of the kids that are watching the videos, and then depending on who wins, that child will get some kind of a gift that week, and we'll leave it at your doorstep, or we'll send it through the mail. And then at the end of the video, we'll do a drawing for the adults, youth, and that, depending on who tells us that they're watching. And then we will again either set some gift on your doorstep, or we will send something through the mail to you for that. So a little bit of a time to have a little bit of fun while we're at this time of social distancing. Now, in regards to the reopening of our church, we have the mailing that's going to go out. It gives you a little bit of details of the plan of what Sturgis Missionary Church is doing, but I understand that there's been some new information that's kind of come forward. We see a lot of churches that are opening up now, and so that's going to make some people wonder, hey, what are we going to be doing as Sturgis Missionary Church? So before I answer that question, I want to give you a little bit of a background so you know why we make the decisions that we make. I won't give you all the details, but one of the more prominent ones. So we have to look at what has God called Sturgis Missionary Church to do, and a big part of that is our vision statement. We are a devoted community of believers, rooted, built up, walking with Christ in worship, making disciples, sharing the gospel so all acquaintances have heard, and no believers left without a church home. And we got that vision statement from God from the 6 core principles of what He asks a church, the corporate church, the gathering together of believers, to be. And so He asks the church in His Word to not forsake the gathering together of believers. So that's our devoted community of believers. He also says the church is there for the equipping of the saints for ministry. So that is our rooted and built up, knowing what we believe and why we believe it, and then how do we apply that to our lives. That leads us into the next one. God says that we are to have kingdom living principles. That is being the people, the Christians that God has asked us to be. So that is our walking with Christ part. And then God asks us to spread his praise and glory throughout the earth. And so that is worshiping Christ. We're told in the Bible to go into all the world and preach the gospel. And so that is sharing the gospel so all acquaintances have heard. And the last one is teaching people to obey. And this is the making disciples and making sure that there's no believer left without a church home. And so as we look at what we're supposed to do as a church, we look at it as what has God called us to do in his visions, the vision that he gave Sturgis Missionary Church, which is based off of God's word. And as we look at that, we say, okay, during this time of social distancing, we have been able to do each of these 6 main functions. Maybe not to their greatest potential, but we're able to do them. The hardest one to do is the do not forsake the gathering together of believers. That's hard to do right now because we can't physically meet with one another. But we looked at that and said, okay, it's not just gathering together as believers, because we understand that's not enough just to show up for church. So there's more to that than just gathering together. So we looked at what does it mean to gather together as believers. And I won't go into all that with you right now, but I want you to know that there's more to it than just physically gathering together. Also, there's an important part, and we looked at this many months ago, but this idea that God brings up that he desires mercy over sacrifice. And so we've looked in that aspect of what does it mean when he says, I wish you would understand what I meant when I said I desire mercy over sacrifice. And we looked at that overarching principle that there is a time that God says the well-being of a human individual trumps a religious rule or regulation that might be put in place. An example of that we see in the Bible is David, who is the king of Israel, kind of somewhat at the time, not exactly a gray area there. But him and his troops are starving to death. And they go by the temple, and inside the temple there's the showbread that's set out every single week, or every single day. But that was only for the priests to eat. But David and his men, who were not priests, were starving. And so they ate of that bread. And God did not judge them, but God used that as an example to show there are some times that mercy trumps a religious proclamation. God said only the priests were allowed to eat that bread, but this made something different. His men were starving. So we look at the do not forsake the gathering together of believers during this time and say, okay, God desires mercy over sacrifice. And so he's saying the health and the well-being of individuals trumps this idea of physically gathering together. We still can't forsake each other. We still need to use our gifts and our talents to help each other out. But the part of coming together physically, God's going to say, this is just for a time. It's okay to back off from that. So we feel like we can do everything God has asked us to do and not be sinning against him. So with that, that puts us into another category, right? The top 2 commandments, they all fall down into love the Lord your God and love your neighbor as yourself. And so if we're fulfilling everything God has asked us to do, we're not sinning against him, then our next area is how do we love our neighbor? And one of the areas we can find in with this is from 1 Corinthians chapter 10, starting in verse 23. Paul tells us, all things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful, but not all things build up. Let no one seek his own good, but the good of his neighbor. So as we look at this time, we say, okay, we're finding out that the government is saying we don't have the right to tell religious organizations that they can't gather together. So right now it is lawful for the church to regather together. But we need to take a look at that second part of what Paul says. Is it helpful? And not just for ourselves. He says not to seek one's own. So is gathering back together, is that just because we want to do it, or is it actually for the good of our neighbor? If we're able to accomplish everything God has asked us to do, and we're not sinning in it, the purpose of getting back together, is it just for ourselves, or is it actually for the betterment of others and the gospel message that we are trying to share? And one of the things that I feel is an issue with if we got back together corporately now just because we have the legal right to, this makes it a very confusing message that we as a church are proclaiming to those who are unbelievers, and in a way even to the believers. You have the government and other authority figures saying it is not safe to gather together in large groups at this time. And then we have maybe the church then that is saying, Jesus loves you. Now let's gather together in a large group and worship him because of how much he loves us. See how that can be kind of a confusing message? If God loves me so much, then why is he asking me to come do something that others are telling me is dangerous for me and dangerous for my loved ones? So again, I just want to encourage you, yes, it might be lawful for the church to gather right now, but we at Sturgis Missionary Church at this time are feeling it's not helpful. So we're going to continue the course that we're going on now until the states and the CDC kind of say that for social gatherings in general, not just religious ones, but social gatherings, that it's safe to kind of be coming back together. That's what we're currently going at. Now, I can't speak for the Lord of what his future intentions are. Maybe that's just the course that we're on now, and maybe in the future God will lead in a different direction. But for now, that's still the course that we're going to be looking at. We're going to wait for the governor to be opening up the state in new ways to be able to go down those avenues. Now, this is not to condemn what other churches are doing. Remember, all things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. So each church had to determine, is it helpful for the mission and the vision that God has given us for us to reopen our doors to physically gather as a church again? For some churches, that is helpful and that is what they need to do. But for us specifically, as Sturgis Missionary Church, we don't feel that it's helpful to the mission and the vision that God has given us to do. So we're going to stay on that same course. But with that, we still know that there's going to be a time that we're going to come back together. We know that there's potential that after the 28th of May, the governor might start opening up sectors of Michigan. And maybe Sturgis will be in one of those areas that we can open up. So with that, we don't know what that's going to look like. Does that mean we're going to be able to get back into our building, or is it going to be small little tiny groups that we can meet back in? We have plans in place as a church to go whatever route, but this is where you come in. We need your help, because if we have to get together in small little clusters, we don't have enough ministry coordinators and staff to be able to accommodate all those groups. So if you would be willing to facilitate one of these groups, I would love to be able to hear from you. Please fill out that contact form of ours on our website, sturgismissionarychurch.com, and let me know that you'd be willing to facilitate this group. We're not going to tell you exactly what you have to do with that. We want it to be open to the Holy Spirit with that. Maybe you want to go over the discussion questions that we have for the sermon that week, or maybe you just want to get together and facilitate a conversation and just see how people are doing and just chat amongst one another. That's okay too. Or maybe you want to bring your own little devotional that you say to the group, and then you get into conversations. But we realize that we have to be organized. We need somebody that's there to kind of help the conversation go and to let everybody know when they can be done and say, okay, it's time to go home now. So if you'd be willing to do something like that, please contact me, let me know. The other area that we would really need some help in is, again, especially if we're in these smaller cluster groups, is we're going to need some people that just let us know that, hey, I'm willing to help clean up afterwards. There's going to be some chairs that have to be sprayed down, disinfected, some doorknobs that need to be sprayed and disinfected, and it's going to take more people than we normally do to kind of clean up. So if you'd be willing to do something like that, please let me know so we know how to kind of disperse the groups and how many groups we can accommodate to be able to stay safe and healthy. And this will even go into if we are able to meet inside our building. Again, more than likely we won't be able to meet as one big congregational group at one time. We'll probably have to have a couple of different services. And so again, we'll have to kind of clean up in between the two. There might be volunteers that we currently have that don't feel comfortable coming back yet. And so we need to know what people are willing to step in and help us out into those roles and say, hey, I'm willing to say hi to people as they walk in to our church doors. I'm willing to wipe down some door handles and some common used surfaces in between the two different services. So again, if you're willing to help us out in those regards, please use the contact us form. Let us know, because there's 3 criteria that we're going to be looking at as we open up our doors as a church. What is the guidelines according to the state and the CDC? Can we safely meet the accommodations that are needed with the sanitation and things like that? And do we have the volunteers in place to be able to make all this happen? So until we get all 3 of those working out, we don't feel it's comfortable to make the next step forward. And so as we look at the next steps forward, this is the area where we need some of your help so we can be prepared when those opportunities come to be able to open up our doors to gather back together. So thank you for spending this time. I know that was a lot of information here, but I hope it answers most of your questions. If I didn't answer some of your questions, feel free again to contact us. Use the contact form on our website, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. And with that, I hope you enjoyed today's message.